Hey guys, JR here, your Grumpy Sound Guy. Welcome to the Grumpy Sound Guy Wednesday night show. Please subscribe to this channel. I always forget to do this at the beginning of the video and it gets buried at the end. And unfortunately, most of you guys don't make it more than 15 minutes maybe into the video. I try to keep the videos to 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes it just goes over, and that's just what it is. I believe that the content that I'm providing is strong enough that if I were watching, I would watch to the end. So anyways, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, share, do all the things that you know you need to do to support a channel like this. Last week we had talked about some things that just kind of jack me up and things that I'm frustrated with in the business. And it's not all secular stuff. I had some guys hit me up in the comments, and some other guys hit me up on private message, direct message, asking me to talk about some of the church install experiences that I've had. I am a Christian. CLP Audio is a Christian company. At least we do our very best to be Christians. We're very flawed. If you follow us, you will find sin, but we are all living under God's grace, and we're trying to let God's glory shine through us as much as we can. So with saying that, I'm hesitant to bring an enormous amount of negative light to the church as a whole. Now, I have all my own hangups about the church. Trust me. I could I could start a podcast talking about my frustrations with the modern church specifically. Let me just say this real quick from a ministry perspective, and we'll move on to the technical stuff here, is that if you're someone who has hesitated to look into Christianity because of the church, I'm here to tell you that many times this junk we see in the church has nothing to do with God. God loves you. Christ died for your sins. He died for you to give you freedom. And when you hurt, he hurts. And he is always there to receive you if you are willing to submit and just kind of give him a shot in your life. It's the best thing I ever did in my life. Maybe I'll do a video some point down the road where I'll give you my testimony of recovery and all kinds of stuff. And without Christ, none of that would have been possible. So, moving forward, even though it's uncomfortable for me to kind of bring all this stuff to light, because I don't want to, the church doesn't need any help looking bad. They tend to do a pretty good job of that, themselves. I have to bring accountability to the table. That's really the bottom line. There are a lot of installers that get taken advantage of, especially guys that are Christians and claim to be from inside the church to some degree or another. They tend to really hone in on guys like us and play the God card with guys like us to try and basically just use you to get free services. There's some situations where I have given those services for free because I felt led and felt drawn to that ministry and drawn to that church to help them out. But on the other side of it, man, it's probably been way more churches that really just had bad intentions, even if it was on a subconscious level. This is a hard subject for me to talk about. It really is. Because, I love the church. I try to love the church. I'll put it that way. No church is perfect. Every church has problems. And there's hypocrites in church the same way there's hypocrites in your local gym. But, again, accountability, So we'll start off with what we'll call Church A. I had been, myself, my family, my parents had been attending a local church, and I got really close with the pastor, had done various things for him for free. I can remember at one point they had gotten a new sound console. This was back in analog days. And, they were intimidated by the 400 knobs on the analog console. So I went up and did a workshop for them. I'm pretty sure it was free, or maybe I worked for lunch. Like maybe the pastor and I went to lunch afterwards or something like that. Just trying to be a good sport, trying to be somebody who supports the ministry. That was a church that I was attending, sporadically. It's hard for me to get into church regularly because I work every weekend. You know, like our career in the music business is we work every weekend and every holiday. You know, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So it's really hard to make it to a Sunday service if you're either working or you didn't get into bed until 4 or 5 a.m. You know, I currently right now am a hired tech director, a part-time employee at a small Methodist church in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And love the church, love the people. You know, it's a pretty groovy place to be. But I mean, there's a lot of mornings that I am, and I even have a couple guys that help me cover that, you know, that deal. But it's still really hard to get there, you know, when you've been out working all night. So, anyways, back to Church A. The pastor and I got really, really close, and they had been in a building program for many years. They got into a new building. There was a whole bunch of drama about getting the building built. I really honestly, looking back, you know, because hindsight's always 20/20, without being too critical, looking back, I just think the pastor was in over his head on this whole project. He was not any sort of general contractor or had any kind of outdoorsy construction type skills. You know, he just wasn't wired that way. He was more of an office guy. And he had a company come in, put up a steel building for him, and it was kind of a nightmare situation. And I think they lost a bunch of money in that because I think the people just took advantage of him and ran off with some of the money. So anyways, he comes to me, they get the building built, it's under roof, you know, they're, I don't know, a month or two away from actually being able to open the doors and have church there. So he comes to me with this bid from an AV company from the city. You know, we're out here in West Virginia along the I-81 corridor, and we're 90 minutes from DC and Baltimore. So a lot of times, you know, churches will reach out to big city installers to come and do their stuff. It was about a $60,000 bid. You know, now, granted, guys, this was probably 20 years ago. So, you know, that was a huge sticker shock for him, you know, and he knew that I worked in this business and this is what I did. At that time, I was a tech director for probably the biggest church in the area. So I was very well known. I trained literally probably 80 or 85% of the tech people that were working in any kind of modern church within about a 30 or 40 mile radius for years and years and years when I was at that church, because I used to do workshops all the time. For free, by the way. And people would come to our church and I would teach pro audio. So I'm like, okay, man. He's like, you know, just absolutely desperate about wanting me to help them out and wanting me to help them, you know, carve down this thing. Is there any way you can do this cheaper? You know, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So this guy's a buddy of mine, you know, and I'm, you know, he's really playing on my heart to, you know, try and be part of the church because that's where I was going at the time and, you know, help him out. So I, you know, just sprung right into action, made a bunch of phone calls, called in some favors with a bunch of industry guys that I'm friends with, wholesalers. I mean, I really, really went out on a limb to try and help these guys out the best I could. I ended up coming back and I chopped the bid in half. So they were at 60 grand, I was about 30 grand. Had an itemized list, detailed list of all the equipment, everything we were going to put in there. Even went to their board of directors and did a presentation about all this. A lot of meetings, a lot of, you know, this, that, and the other. Well, probably, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks go by, maybe not even that long. Maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks went by, and I haven't heard anything from the guy. You know, I'm like, you know, what's going on here? Because these favors that I pulled were like, they were temporary favors. That pricing was temporary. Some of the stuff we were looking at was B stock, you know, and if you know anything about, you know, pro audio retail, I used to work at Washington Music Center, Chuck Levin. So, I mean, I'm very well versed in all that. You know, those prices don't last very long. You get about a net 30 on those things and, you know, they're going to disappear. So I contacted him. He's like, oh, well, we just had, you know, a volunteer, some DJ that just started going to the church. You know, they went to him and gave him my bid and basically took my itemized list of gear and went and bought all the gear himself and did the install for almost nothing, I guess, or whatever. So then I call the guy and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, well, we just had, so-and-so do it for us or whatever. He just volunteered to do it for free, or I don't know, for a little of nothing. And I was very hurt by that. I'm like, well, man, I mean, you had positioned yourself and your board of directors had positioned themselves that this was a done deal. Like, we were going to do this. No one had signed any contracts yet or anything, but, you had led me to believe, and you implied that, you were going with me, that this was more than fair, and we were going to make this happen. And he basically just came back and was like, no, we never had any commitment with you. No, I mean, I probably had 100 hours in this thing, already, just trying to really jump through a bunch of hoops and help him out, plus work for nickels and dimes, and he just totally dropped the ball on the whole thing. So then fast forward like a year, and then the guy calls me and says, hey, we'd like to have you install a projector for us. And I'm like, well, have your DJ guy that did your sound system do it. Well, no, he doesn't know anything about video, and he doesn't want to do it. Well, he didn't want to do it because it was hard to do. We were going to have to get a lift in there. It was a whole thing with the way the structure was to hang the thing. It was a multi-purpose room, so we had to put a cage around the projector. It was a whole ordeal, and I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, it's going to cost this amount of money. And at this point, I have no desire to give you any break on anything. And they paid it. They said, okay, fine. So believe it or not, my father and I, because my father went to the church there as well, we went in there and in about a day and a half or 2 days, got the projector installed, got everything up and going, and it was all good, ready to go. Well, the way the stage was built, it was a 3-wall back wall behind where the band is. And they were using like overhead projectors before this, by the way. And, the projector I put up was giving us like I don't even know, 16 or 18 foot, maybe 20 foot wide. I'm going to say 16 or 18 foot wide by like 10 or 12 foot tall screen. I mean, and the room was not that deep. The room was only like 80 feet deep. So it looked nice, man. I mean, I really did a good job on the install. The thing was absolutely amazing. It just was going to really kick them up to the next level with the projector. Now, I already got kind of a sore taste in my mouth how the audio stuff worked out, which, by the way, while I'm in there doing this projector install, whoever did the audio install was just absolutely, the stuff was horrible. The gear he put in there, he didn't use the gear that was on my thing. They cheesed out on a whole bunch of stuff, and it just was a mess. Guys, statistically, most churches will buy 3 production systems before they get the one they really need. They'll get the one that was dictated by the local DJ, then they'll get the next one will be the upgrade. So somebody like me showed up and said, okay, well, we'll put a Band-Aid on this and give you the upgrade. And then finally, you'll let someone like me come in and say, this is what you really need to do, and that will be a big ticket install, and that will give the church, set it on its course and give them what they really need moving forward for many years to come, sometimes decades. I always build, future-proofing into a lot of my installs so that we're overshooting 30 or 35% of what your requirements are today, so you don't outgrow the system 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years down the road. So the system's still relevant to your ministry and to your programming. So I get a phone call after the projector install, and the guy is like, hey man, there's something wrong with this projector install. I'm like, oh really? Well, what's up? He's like, well, we wanted the screen to come to the edges of that center wall. Like I said, it was a 3-wall, kind of setup. And he goes, that thing it's not going all the way to the edge of the wall. And I'm like, well, you never asked for it to go to the edge of the wall. You said you wanted a projector, and you gave me a list of specifications as far as it being in a cage and being in a multi-purpose room and all that kind of stuff. You never once ever mentioned that you needed this thing to go another 8 or 12 inches each way to get to the corner of the wall. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. That was not part of the deal. It's not on the contract. I mean, I hate to be a jerk, but you already screwed me once in this situation. You're not screwing me again. Is anyone in the room complaining they can't see the projector? Like I said, the room's only 80 feet deep. That's not very, very deep. Now, it was probably 100 feet wide, but still, this screen you could see from anywhere you sat in the room, you could see the thing. I mean, it looked amazing. It really did. This guy wasn't happy about it. And I was like, well, I'll tell you what, man, take me to court, sue me over it, because there's nothing in the contract that says that that's what your requirements were. I even looked at maybe getting another lens for it, trying to maybe jump through their hoops and make them happy. But another lens was like, $3,000 or something like that for that projector. And it just wasn't happening, man. And it was a classic case of that is a church that has all chiefs and no Indians, which means every time I went in there to do part of the install on this projector, there was another person claiming to be in charge that had a completely different set of expectations than what was on the contract and what I had been hired to do. And it was an absolute nightmare. So that was church number one. Church number two was a church that I became a Christian in. It's a church that I rededicated my life to the Lord in 1994. And, we had this huge growth spurt while I was there. We had changed from Southern gospel music to contemporary music. And that just was really, we're talking like I said, 94, 95. The church just blew up, So we went into another building project and we was going to need another install. These guys, and man, I was young, man. I was like, I don't know, 24 or something, 23, something like that, fresh off the road. Really didn't have a whole bunch of install experience, but it wasn't rocket science, I'm a pretty smart guy that way. And I have my handy dandy Yamaha Sound Reinforcement Handbook, which is the Bible of install and pro audio. But the problem with that situation is they were building a $500,000 building, and they gave me like an $8,000 or $10,000 budget to do everything. Well, we basically just did audio, and we did it to the best of our ability, with the money that we had to do it with. And when it was over with, all they did was bellyache and complain about how they didn't think the room was covered right. I spent countless hours down there, and I did it for free because it was my home church. I was young and just, full of piss and vinegar and just all on fire for Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And did the whole thing for free. I ran into that pastor like 5 or 10 years later at a restaurant, and he made a beeline for me to tell me that the soundboard had quit working. It was every bit of 8 or 10 years later, because a whole bunch of stuff went down in that church. I ended up leaving the church about 1.5 or 2 years after the install. He was still harboring on that. And I'm like, well, yeah, it was an analog console with an external power supply. I'm like, yeah, something probably went wrong in the power supply. Here's a place you can take it to. Here's the phone number. You can get it repaired and your console will be just fine. Well, I can't believe you spent all that money and that thing didn't last any longer than, 5 or 6 years or whatever. And I'm like, well, there is maintenance involved in what we do. And that was another situation where I was pulling strings to get them the best deal they could possibly get them. And they were just ungrateful. I can't remember once in all that church really treated me like trash. And they were good to me in one sense, but initially when I came in with the sides of my head shaved and was fresh off a road with a metal band and was just really falling in love with Jesus, they did a horrible job of cultivating that with me. It was a cookie cutter ministry where you need to look like them, talk like them, dress like them, believe like them. You had your own, Pentecostal language that you needed to, throw. It was very churchy. I learned some really hard lessons through that time of my life. I probably had, 200 hours in that install, 300 hours in that install. Did it all by myself. Had one guy came and helped me pull some cable one night. Did blunt-ended snakes, split them all out the floor pockets, spent countless hours, soldering up the floor pockets and all that kind of stuff and everything. And that's how they thanked me. Crazy, huh? Shortly after that, I ended up at a big Baptist church and was there for 7 years. Had an amazing time there. Good people. Played a lot of really good music there. Had a really strong, praise and worship team and that sort of thing. And man, they just kept waving the carrot in front of me and waving the carrot in front of me about full-time employment. I was in my late 20s, early 30s at this point, and was really, really wanting to be full-time in the ministry, I was part-time employee, I was paid staff, but, and it just beat you to death. And I don't think anybody really wanted to do it intentionally. Although there were times where it was intentional. I would sit in countless meetings where we would put protocol in place to where this church had 3 in-house systems and 2 mobile systems. I was in charge of all that, and they planted churches like crazy. So I was putting little mobile sound systems together all the time for the churches that they were planting and that sort of thing. So needless to say, it was a big ministry. It really was, and it was a lot to keep up with on a part-time schedule. But we would set in meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings, putting protocol in place to where if a special event needs to happen, I need to be the first phone call so I can staff the event, as I probably had 15 or 20 people underneath of me, a volunteer staff that I was in charge of scheduling and, all that kind of stuff. And it was over and over again, they would not do that. They would just blatantly waste my time in meetings and then get all butthurt when I would get irritated with it. Like, why am I even here at this meeting? Because you guys aren't going to follow the protocol. You're just going to do whatever you want to do, and you just expect me to come along and sweep it all up. And that went on for quite a while. It really did. And I put up with it for quite a while. I was going through my first divorce at that time, and I was in a very rough place emotionally and psychologically. And I really just felt very used, and I really felt like they took full advantage of all that kind of stuff. Now, there were good people there who loved me. There were good people there who helped me. That church did help me in many, many ways. But technically and from an AV standpoint, it was an absolute bear of a job. I remember when I first took the job, we had to do like 60 or 70 PowerPoint slides just for the sermon, and I was doing everything. I was doing audio, lighting, video, and all the cell development stuff as well. Now we have, super cool programs. You can do that lickety split. And then the pastor would use about 4 or 5 of those slides week after week after week. At one point, like when my first wife and I first split up, I kind of just popped and took a 6-month sabbatical. And when I came back, they did come to me and apologize about the workload they had on me. They had no idea that I was doing so much. And they had chiseled down my job description to just sound and lighting. And then they had hired 2 other people. So I was doing the job of 3 people, and managing a gigantic volunteer staff and training all the staff from the children's ministry, from the college ministry, from the teen ministry to know how to use their mobile sound systems and constantly keep up with all that. And man, it was just a lot. And it finally got to the point to where I just got tired of getting taken advantage of. And I got tired. I remember one year they were all but promising me a full-time, position. And they ended up hiring like 2 janitors instead of me. And that was really the straw that broke the camel's back. I was like, you know what? That's the sort of thing that you can get volunteers to do. But yet I'm like the second most important guy in your Sunday morning service, and you treat me like chopped liver. I can't tell you how many times I slept at the church during Christmas and Easter seasons preparing for their big production stuff. Because they would have 150 cast member kind of giant production, things for Christmas and Easter. And it was countless times. I slept on the couch in my office, to be there, to be able to get everything done. I was doing all the pre-production for everything. I would start pre-production 4 weeks out. And then it would take about a week and a half after it was all done and over with to get the church in the stage and everything back in order to be able to do what they needed to do. But, the last production would be Saturday night. Well, guess what? We got Sunday morning service the next morning. So they would have to tear down the physical set that they had built after the last performance, which takes a couple hours. And then, by 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm resetting the stage by myself, to make Sunday morning service look like the other 50 weeks a year, Same thing at Easter. It's just a lot, man. It's just a lot. And I wasn't someone who complained all the time about that stuff. I wasn't someone who, tooted my own horn or any of that kind. That's why they didn't know I was doing what I was doing, when they first reevaluated my job description. But the church is a tough place, man. It really is. And the church makes it hard to go to church. It really does. And when you're trying to work inside of the church production industry, and I'll add one more thing. And I know the video is going long, man. I'm sorry. I just talk a lot, But this is a subject that is very close to my heart. Probably the biggest thing that drives me nuts at this stage of my career about working in churches is there's always somebody there who has everybody bamboozled into believing that they are an expert when 9 times out of 10 they are not. And they have no idea what they're doing. Most of the time, they're an IT guy. They're an IT guy who spent an enormous amount of time on YouTube or reading, AV forums and stuff like that. They want to spend the church's money to play with this expensive gear and that sort of thing. They're not really getting the church what they need. They're getting the church whatever the latest, greatest, newest, shiny toy is, and that's not how I roll with any of my installs. I did recently do an install for a small Pentecostal church on the other side of the county that went absolutely amazing. You know why? They followed my lead. No one stood there questioning every step of what I was doing. They treated me like I was the expert because I am. I told them what it was going to cost, and the number hurt because guess what? None of this stuff is cheap. You cannot halfway your way into a church install. If you do, you're just throwing that money right out the window. So I told them what it was going to take. I had done a consultation with them about 2 years ago, and they had a financial plan to try and put money together to do the next step of what they wanted to do there. And they did that. And when they had the money, they called me. I ordered the gear. We went out. We had a phenomenal time. We spent a couple days doing the install, was laughing and having a great time. I found a family there, Like, if I was free on Sunday mornings and it wasn't 40 minutes away, that's probably where I would be on Sunday mornings. And I don't really even dig the whole Pentecostal thing anymore. I grew up that way, but I probably lean more, community church Baptist, than I do anything these days. But yeah, that was a great example of how everything goes great. Now, one of the guys that works for me has been fighting through an install for the last year and a half with a church who has an IT guy who thinks he knows more than my guy, and I'll guarantee you he doesn't, because my guy's got me in his hip pocket, and whenever he gets in a jam, he calls me, and I make sure that he's taken care of, because he's my guy. I take care of my people, I don't have to go out on site. I mean, if that was the case, then, we'd probably have to figure out some kind of financial, reimbursement for that, but the guy is totally competent. He knows what he's doing, and the things he calls me about are always minor little things. It's just, he's young, and he doesn't have, 35 years of experience in this like I do. So nevertheless, he has been fighting this IT guy the whole time, every step of the way. This guy is going to the pastor. He's in the pastor's ear saying, I don't think we need this. I think we need to do this over here and all that. And when I get in those situations now, I did a workshop one time for a Methodist church on the other side of the county where I got about 80% through the workshop. Everything's going great. People, the light's coming on in people's minds. They're really seeing what's happening. This guy shows up. He's the resident expert and just totally tears down the whole workshop. Comes in there, guns a-blazing. He had himself personally wired up a bunch of stuff in the church, and some of it was incorrect. And that hit a nerve with him, Now, I gave the guy his due credit. I'm like, man, you really have a lot of time invested in what you've done here. That's awesome. I wasn't a jerk about it at all. Honestly, I wasn't. This is church, guys. This ain't a nightclub. I try to approach people in love when I can. He wanted to argue with me about how what I was saying was not wrong. I literally had to tear connectors apart and show him how he had polarity backwards and things like that. It was just stuff that was not good about the install that was causing them problems. Well, once the light came on and he realized that I was right, he just kind of lost his crap, man. He went running to the pastor's office. This was on a Saturday. He went running to the pastor's office. The pastor was there, preparing for Sunday morning, and it just became a whole thing, man. It became a whole drama-filled thing. And the sad thing is the church sort of kind of took his side. Like, they almost didn't pay me for the workshop over this. And I'm like, I'm the expert. I'm the guy that you hired to come in here to figure out what this guy can't figure out. Because obviously he's been here all along. He's the reason that you're having these problems. Listen to me. 90% of the time when I walk into that scenario, it's that IT guy or DJ who thinks he's an installer that is the problem. I stood in one workshop and seen where someone had all the speaker cables wired backwards. And then they kept blowing amps, and they couldn't figure out why they were blowing amps. This was like Class A amp stuff. It's like 20 years ago, which couldn't tolerate a whole bunch of that junk, Losing drivers and the speakers, and the pastor looks at me and is like, I'm like, did you buy these cables from the store? Did somebody make them? And this guy speaks up. He's like, no, I made all the cables. I pull one of the ends apart, and it's like, the polarity's backwards, man. Like, that's an easy mistake to make. I'm not judging you. Your heart was in the right place, but you've now cost the church thousands of dollars because you didn't know what you were doing. And that's why it's so important to bring somebody like me to your situation that has decades of experience doing this and can tell you what you need to do and do it right the first time. Yeah, it's probably going to cost a lot more money than you're comfortable with, but it's going to be done right. And 10 years from now, you're still going to be calling me like, JR, man, the system you put in is just rock solid. It's still working. We're not having any problems. Now, look, I'm not saying that there's not times where gear breaks. That happens. My gear breaks sometimes. I mean, it just happens. It is what it is. But if you put your best foot forward and you have experienced guys and knowledgeable guys in place doing your install, then that's never going to be a huge problem. It may be a minor problem at some point or another. And I know a lot of installers that exclusively work in churches that just blatantly screw churches all the time because of this very reason. They will write in a drama fee, which isn't listed on the contract, but they're increasing their price by 25, 30% because your IT guy or your DJ guy is going to be, looking over their shoulder the whole time. No installer wants to deal with that. I intentionally do most of my install overnight because there's no one around. And I can get a lot more done a whole lot quicker that way, Instead of being in there at 9 in the morning where you got the whole staff in the place and, this guy took a day off of work because he wants to come in and ask you a million questions while you're trying to do the install because he wants to learn, and then go right behind your back and tell the pastor that you don't know what you're doing and question everything. That's why installers charge what they charge. Because they don't want to put up with that crap. This is the very reason why I don't do a whole bunch of install stuff anymore. If I get a church that comes to me and has the right attitude, like the church I was just talking about, who just kind of followed my lead, okay, I'm there. And I have 2 or 3 of those just in the last year and a half, 2 years, that I could give you references to that went amazing because they recognized the fact that this is the guy who knows what he's doing. And then the people that were working at the church humbled themselves and followed my direction. And during the training process, man, those are the churches I'm going to give 100% bang for the buck. I'm going to be very motivated to do a little extra here and a little extra there, or dedicate another hour of my time to make sure your staff is trained right because you're doing things my way. My way will always be better. My way will always go quicker. My way will always give you the results that you have expected to get. Because I usually sit down with these guys beforehand and I say, hey, look, what are your expectations? What are you wanting to do? I had one church tell me, hey, we have no intention to grow. We're a quaint little, church that kind of very cliquey, kind of like a little social club kind of thing. And we're not looking to move into a big building. We like our old church. We just want to keep things the way they are. We just need things to operate better. Okay, I mean, that, to me, in my mind, that told me that they have absolutely no vision for ministry, that all they have is a little country club going on there. But I'm not there to judge. I'm there to make a living. So I did exactly what they wanted me to do. We got it done. And to this day, that's been almost, man, I don't even know. That's been 8 or 10 years ago, something like that. And they're as happy as a pig in mud. Every time I run into somebody from the church, they're just screaming about how happy they are with how things are at the church still almost 10 years later. So that's kind of my rant on all that. I tried to soften the blow as best as I could and not get too hypercritical. But the reality of it is, so many churches are literally losing tens of thousands of dollars to an IT guy or a DJ who thinks they know what they're doing in their church. And they're having a church spend hard-earned money on things they probably don't even need, or they get gear they don't even know how to operate. I can't tell you how many times I've seen IT guys talk a church into buying a $10,000, digital console and have no clue how to operate the thing. They're going to get it and just figure it out. That's their whole, viewpoint. And then you wonder why, after spending all that money, your Sunday morning services are still squealing, or your live feed sounds like, mud and just crazy stuff. Again, guys, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with all your church people. Be smart. If you're a pastor and you're watching this and you're staring right down the barrel of an install, give me a call. If I don't have time to do it, I'll refer you to a competent installer who's not going to rob you blind and actually knows what they're doing. So, think about what you're doing before you do it. Don't let some of these guys who really have no proven track record that go to your church, who may have a great heart, might be the nicest people in the world, really love the Lord, all that kind of stuff. Don't let that overshadow the lack of skill they may be bringing to the table. Because there's a huge difference between making a little stick rig work at a wedding reception and actually doing an install that needs to work for, 10, 15 years without major issues. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next time.